Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to be in community with you and the LEC participants this evening. We're just so grateful for the opportunity to connect. I'm joined today with Katie Castor, and we'll invite Katie to introduce herself before we get into our presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Castor, and I work with Rudy at Edifying Teachers, and I'm also very glad to be with you all in community. So, gracias. Thank you, Rudy.
Thank you, Katie. And so we have some folks, even extended team members, that are listening in and among the attendees as well, including our Director of Research, Dr. Faith Connolly, as well as a couple of our extended team members that I want to shout out, Adrian Porter and Melshawn Randolph. And Adrian and Melshawn are actually beginning to provide a value add for Kansas City already, kind of behind the scenes. And this is news that we've begun sharing today with Kansas City community members. Adrian and Melshawn are actually capstone students in the graduate program in education, policy, and leadership at American University. And so Kansas City is one of several communities that we're excited to engage with this year around the country. And so what they're doing is looking at what are some of the policies in place around supporting teacher diversity in Kansas City, in Kansas, and in other parts of the country, so that we can share some of these best and promising practices, both in terms of policy and practice. So I'm glad they were able to join us this evening, and you may have a chance to connect and chat with them further as well. So we really want to hear from those who are able to join this afternoon, and we're grateful that this will also be recorded and be an opportunity to kind of grow this mentor network, both in Kansas City and beyond. I did see a hand up from Margaret, and so I don't know if I should keep an eye on the chat, but feel free to drop notes in the chat if you have questions for us. I think we have a Q&A set up as well. We have just kind of a few slides to help guide the conversation, but we do want it to be a conversation. And again, in terms of our work, we have a really amazing leadership team, but we also have a really amazing network, and we're happy that LEC is part of the network, and this is a growing network. And our whole approach is thinking about how we can link arms with values-aligned organizations, including LEC and others, and how we can find the best and the brightest leaders, and especially leaders of color who can help advance this important work. So I'm going to share, like I said, a few slides just to let you know a little bit about what has helped guide our thinking. And this is thinking that continues to evolve. We want to make sure that we are listening and centering and elevating the voices of educators, and again, especially educators of color. And so what we're going to share here is a little snapshot. Now, being, of course, initially a classroom teacher for 8 years in my hometown of Milwaukee Public Schools, I'll give you a little wait time before we jump in with discussion around these data. But I want you to see, what do you notice between the two columns, teachers on average, which we know 80% of teachers being not teachers of color, and then what do you notice about the response rates of our BIPOC teachers to this national survey?
And the chat is open, so if folks want to engage that way, please feel free to.
So of course, we did a little highlighting here in the red. These are 3 areas that stood out to us after our work had begun. That was not only affirming to our work, but really helped motivate and push us forward to continue to think about this work differently, because there have been so many headlines, coming out of the pandemic and currently about especially the importance of increasing teacher salaries, and we support that. We were one of the few organizations that endorsed the American Teacher Act to increase teacher salaries, as well as the Retain Act. These are federal policies that Adrian Melshawn's professor, Dr. Moss, actually helped develop and support federal legislation that has some good momentum. And while we do think salary is important, we know that it isn't the salary that has brought teachers of color into the profession, and it isn't just salary that's going to keep us in the profession and in the field. And the numbers here are literally the inverse. Only 22% of teachers of color are saying that would be the key factor to keep them in. But on the flip side of that, even more dramatically, we see that more than 5 times the rate of teachers of color are saying, give us more professional development, give us more support, and that will help keep us in the profession. Give us more leadership opportunities in the profession while continuing to teach. So we want to have that student impact. We want to be able to refill our cups professionally as well as emotionally by being able to give back to students from our communities, students who look like us, and all students. But we need help with that career navigation. So those 3 differentiators don't usually make the headlines because unfortunately the folks writing the headlines are not necessarily elevating our voices. And so we think it's so critical to do that and to attend to that. And so that has really driven our design process and the way we approach the work. Katie, I'll let you pick it up from here since you helped help us shape this and make this more clear over the last year or so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rudy. So really, this is our focus on our mission. So here at Edifying Teachers, our mission is really help rehumanize and strengthen the teacher workforce and through a community of holistic mentorship, coaching, and peer support, where teachers, can connect and learn with and from each other. And so I really want to emphasize that idea of rehumanize, right? I think one of the things that the teacher profession has gone through in the last couple years is really kind of this disconnect, right? And at the end of the day, we are all humans, we are supporting humans, and we really need to bring that empathy, that humanity back into the practice. And so we'll talk more about how we do that specifically. And also just to let everybody know, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. It seems like the chat was disabled, but we are able to see your questions in the Q&A. Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks so much, Katie. And there are many ways that the work that we do is different than work that is already out there. And so we want to emphasize those pieces. A big aspect of our work is helping folks be seen as whole people. And so you notice some of those keywords here in our mission statement. We know that there are a lot of great groups doing the important work of instructional coaching, but we know that it's not just being able to have particular pedagogical strategies or even instructional strategies that's going to help make sure that somebody comes back to school the next day or the next week or the next year. And we know that there are a lot of other challenging aspects of navigating school spaces, which in a lot of situations are predominantly white spaces as well. And so we want to make sure that we're providing an open and safe space to help listen. And our guiding question is always, what does support look like for you in this moment? And so the approach that we provide and the support that we provide is actually non-evaluative mentorship to make sure that we're giving that holistic view of teachers and making sure that they're seen and supported. And so again, this research driven approach, it came out of my research. So our whole team has that type of background where I'm approaching just my 2-year anniversary of completing my doctorate, and this was the focus. We wanted to better understand why are teachers leaving and what can we do about it. Katie right now is in that same on that same journey. So as they say, you got next. So she's got next on that, studying at Teachers College at Columbia. So really grateful to have her area of expertise in this work. But what the research has shown is that when teachers come into the profession, they're very excited. They feel that they can make an impact in the lives of students and in student achievement. But teaching is very hard and it can be very isolating. And so they often, face what's called reality shock and they lose that sense of self-efficacy. And so what we've designed, as you'll see this evening and this afternoon, is a manageable cadence of regular support. So we provide regular touch points that fits in a teacher's schedule to make sure that we're giving them that encouragement and that support that they need on a consistent basis. So who are these folks? Katie, since you support our edifiers, why don't you say a little bit about this?
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have a very wide range of edifiers, if you will, that help us support our teachers. Just like the slide says, you know, we obviously identify high achieving, values aligned, experienced mentors, coaches, and other educators. So for example, and we train them and we call them our edifiers. Again, I would say some of them are still teachers. We actually have a cohort of national board certified teachers right now that we're providing some mentorship for. Some of our edifiers are also, you know, have a wide range of administration experience. They may be in curriculum design. I would say we have a large portion of edifiers who are either have their doctorates or are pursuing programs in higher ed. So really, they all kind of bring, I would say, like their own experiences, their own strengths. And so these are just two of our mentors that we do have. One of them I work with quite closely with, Mrs. Magdalena Mata. Ms. Mata is from supports our she supports our cohort in Ector, Texas. Sorry, Texas, I had to think for a minute. And so she is actually a national board certified teacher. And she's been helping to coach and support that cohort down there. And again, I know it's very small, but you can kind of see like what are her accolades, what she brings to the relationship, but also why did she choose to coach, right? Like what is her why? And so I think it's really important as we look at matches too, which is another process Rudy will go into in a little bit, is the importance of diversity, right? Just not only within offering edifiers of color and mentees, but also just in general, like we are not a monolith. And that's something that I want to stress. I myself identify as Latina. I am originally from El Salvador. And so one of the things that my research has really looked into is this idea that even as Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, you know, we are a whole bunch of things. We are just not one thing. We are a lot beyond being just Latino, Latina. And so again, when we think about these mentors and this support, we really focus on what are those matches and what are those intersectionalities as well. Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks so much, Katie. And so with respect to the work that we've been doing, I'll use that example that Katie brought up last year when we began working with Ector County. Of the 20 teachers that we were supporting initially in that cohort, 11 were Latinas. And so the power of our model and the power of the network that we're building and the power of connecting with you all this evening is that all 11 of those Latina teachers were mentored by a Latina mentor that had become part of our network of mentors. What I've been really excited about coming into this school year is the fact that Katie was able to help us build specifically a culturally sustaining mentorship training model and program. And so what we're really, not to give it all away, before the end of the conversation, but what we're really excited to invite you all to consider is to go through that training. We think that this is a value add for anybody, even somebody who has done a lot of coaching or instructional coaching or mentorship. We want to make sure that there's some substance, some understanding, some quality, and so we take folks through making sure that they understand how to explain and talk about how they identify. And one of the pieces that is really cool about our evolution of our model this year is that instead of just saying, here's a great mentor for you, and to Katie's point earlier, we don't just say, oh, you're a Latina teacher, here's a Latina mentor that we have for you. What we do instead is we give the teachers the option to choose who they most identify with. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. But we always want to make sure that we are empowering the teachers and making sure that we're supporting their identity. So we try to make things easy to remember. And so you'll see a lot of alliteration in our frameworks and in our models and in the ways we talk about the work. We want to make sure that there's some common language that we can use, but that also is research based. And so the term self-efficacy, it sounds kind of technical. You may or may not have heard of it before. The research, in psychology that, developed this identified 4 pathways. We kind of rebranded them to make them easier to remember. So these are our 4 M's. And so, Katie, if you don't mind, why don't you tell them a little bit about the 4 M's?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. Sorry about that. So yeah, and just like Rudy said, I want to say that self-efficacy, really is do you feel like you have the skills and the confidence to do your job? Essentially, it's like, do you feel confident that you're prepared and can do what you're being asked? That essentially is self-efficacy. And there are 4 ways in which this can be built. One of them obviously is modeling. So that's demonstrating the skill of others in the profession. Another way we call is social persuasion, which is essentially what we call mentoring, right? So that's encouragement, that's kind of that coaching by a good trusted mentor or another adult. Another way we build self-efficacy is a positive mindset, right? So, and we'll talk more about the importance of these 4, but really that shift, being able to be open, right, to work through those challenges. And lastly, the last one is mastering. And this is really like experiences that facilitate that experience of, you have this set of skills and you feel like you have them and you can apply them to be successful. And is anything you are welcome to add, Rudy? And if anyone has any questions, again, please pop them in the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Katie. So one of the wonderful things about, again, the fact that we've, developed this model informed by the research, informed by evidence, is that there's some structure to it that is, founded, has its foundations in the evidence base, but also it has flexibility to it. And so every mentorship conversation looks different, week to week, month to month, person to person. And we have easy ways to make sure that our mentors can help us understand what were the particular areas of focus in those conversations, and that we can help guide these conversations, because the way that our model works is that we're actually partnering with schools. And so we're partnering with groups of teachers at schools primarily. And we want to make sure that schools and school leaders are not just saying, oh, this is an issue that now Edifying Teachers can come and solve this problem for us. We want to help. We want to be an important support, but we also want to build local capacity. And so as we're having these conversations, as the mentorship is happening over the course of the year, we actually share that back with the school leaders. And I'll get a little bit more into that in just a minute. So. We've talked a bit about the edifier's role, and I want to use this as a way to just convey the fact that we're a very inclusive organization, and so we don't need everybody to have their doctorate. We don't need everybody to have 10 years of experience as an instructional coach. We don't need everybody to have the same background. We welcome and we appreciate diversity of backgrounds. We want to make sure that prospective mentors can get the training that they need, and that folks can lean in on their particular strengths. So I do want to assure you about that. And we do have flexibility to make some adjustments even in matches as well. And we can get into that in a little bit. I see a question in the Q&A that asks, if selected, do we sign up directly with Edifying or the LEC? And so what we are setting up through our interest form, which is available on our website. So we've got 2 easy calls to action button. One is, bring mentorship to my community. The other is be a mentor. And so if you want to be a mentor, we want to make sure that you can do that. And we also want to make sure that if you're part of the LEC community, LEC knows that, we know that, and that we can think about how to elevate that, especially as we begin to talk with some of the schools and districts in the Kansas City area, so that folks know about your affiliation with LEC. And that your mentees, prospective mentees, can also know about that affiliation. So just a little snapshot here. You've probably seen some of our friendly faces and a little bit of our marketing out there on social media. And so we want to make sure, again, that we're building local capacity, and that this isn't just seen as, Edifying Teachers has provided a mentor. I don't have to think about this teacher the rest of the year. Not at all. We want to make sure that, again, that we're building capacity. We know that in the same way that there's a lot of teacher turnover, we know that there's also a lot of principal and school leader turnover. And whether a principal is in their first year or further along, they want to build their skills and they want to make sure that they know their people better. And so this is a partnership and this is a collaboration. And, every part of our network, organizational partners as well as school and district partners, are thought partners with us. And so we want to share what we're learning. We want to hear from them. We want to make sure that the support that we're providing is timely. And so you'll see 4 different faces here on this illustration of our cycle of support model, the teacher mentees, the edifiers, but then also our local leadership team and the school leadership team. So Katie gave a great example earlier of Magdalena Mata, who is our local lead down for our work with our Texas district partner. And so we want to make sure that if we're supporting Kansas City, Kansas teachers or Kansas City, Missouri teachers, that anybody who's helping, even if we're drawing from mentors from another community, that the teacher doesn't feel any sort of confusion, that they understand, what we're talking about, that we're using terminology that aligns with what they're hearing in their training and what they're expected to do in the classroom. And so we identify local leads, and we're definitely, as we're inviting folks to sign up to be mentors, we're also kind of keeping an eye out and hearing for who might be a great local lead in Kansas City, who might be a great local lead in a particular school, so that we can make sure that somebody who is trusted in the community, who's based in the community, can continually orient us, because we know that times change, things change, again, especially month to month in particular communities and in particular schools. And so we use an opportunity to make sure that that person helps guide these conversations. So here's an illustration of that. I'll again give a little wait time to process this visual. And Katie, as you've been guiding this work this year with our partners, anything you would add in terms of helping people, understand and maybe bring a little bit of life to this visual?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the examples that I can talk about is we have a cohort of teachers in Baltimore, Maryland, at GSA, which is a charter school. And one of the things in terms of how this cycle of support works is, for example, teachers meet with their edifiers or mentors. We call them edifiers, but they have, say, a session. They schedule a session. It's virtual one-to-one mentorship. From there, after the session, right, it's we debrief, we figure out like we have a session notes, we talk about what their goals are, and obviously all that takes place within their mentoring session. From there, we do meet with the leadership team at least once a month to kind of debrief the number of sessions that mentees have received, as well as any additional support that we can offer. At the same time, the other thing we do while this is going on is, and that's really the collaborative leadership review, is we also have edifier huddles or monthly chats. So every 1 week during the month, edifiers come together, they share best practices, they share the challenges and the strengths that they've been experiencing. And so it's also a chance for them to be in communities just with mentors to kind of learn from each other. And then the added piece as well is this community support. So back to my example about the Baltimore charter school, they have something called the New Teacher Institute once a month. And so what we do is we support that work. And that's when their new teachers come together and they're able to provide with their support. Obviously, we work in a team with them together. We provide an hour professional development. An example of that professional development has been for example, I'm thinking like LEC levels, test assessment, how to look at assessment scores, lesson planning. So just foundational skills that new teachers may be asking for that they need some more support on. And the great thing about this that makes this a cycle, as Rudy was talking about, is say during their NTI, their New Teacher Institute, they get introduced to a framework. And again, that framework has been approved and kind of supported by administration. From there, they also might be using the same framework within their virtual mentor sessions, right? So again, it's this follow through of supports and communication. And I would say communication is probably the number one key in this cycle, is that everyone is constantly in communication with each other with really the outcome to support the teacher, right? Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks so much, Katie. I think that was very well explained. So I think it was about 2 months ago, we not only had the opportunity to be featured by Education Week nationally, but also we kind of quietly did a light refresh on our website. So if you haven't been to our website in a while, you wouldn't have seen this look. but this is what it looks like when you go out there. And like I mentioned earlier, we've got two pretty simple call to action buttons up top, and I think in a couple other places. To be a mentor is the easy way to express an interest following this conversation, and we definitely want to have time for some Q&A here before we do close. But also there's a button, the purple one, that you can click to express an interest in bringing mentorship to your community. So again, whether you're at a charter school, a school or a school district, we want to talk with you and think about how we might be able to be a help to your teachers. And I'm going to take a look at our comment here. And Marguerite, I appreciate your sharing your comment in the Q&A section, talking about the importance of mentorship. We kind of jumped into the data around the differences in perspective for teachers of color versus majority teachers. But at the same time, the heart of the work in terms of, again, the data-driven, this being a data-driven approach, is just the fact that, for more than a decade, education researchers have seen that teacher mentorship actually does make a difference and does make an impact in retaining teachers. And, one of the leaders in the field, said earlier, just, last spring, basically, we had a lot of hope for teacher mentorship, but, we couldn't figure out how to scale it. And so she kind of moved on in the webinar conversation, and the field kind of moved on. And so we're really pleased that, we haven't given up on what the research has shown as far as what works for teachers, and especially teachers of color. We know that coming out of the pandemic, teachers are leaving at higher rates, and we know that teachers of color are leaving at the highest rates. And so we want to make sure that we're providing a mechanism for those who want to give back to give back, and those who could benefit from it to receive it. A couple pieces I'll mention kind of on the financial side, just to kind of put that information out there as well in terms of how we approach this work differently. Was just talking with one of our leadership team members yesterday about the fact that folks have been calling out in the field in a good way, especially in communities of color, the fact that we shouldn't call for mentorship without sponsorship. And so one thing that does make our model different is that in a lot of cases, when folks are asked to provide mentorship or be a mentor, there's an expectation in a lot of ways, in most places, that that's voluntary. And so I do want to reassure you that, kind of per the social media posts you may have seen and per the marketing, like, we do pay our mentors. And so on the one hand, we pay our mentors, and we feel that we pay pretty generously. But also when it comes to the mentees, we don't believe that that's something that the mentees should have to pay for. And so there are other different types of resources where, I feel like people sometimes take advantage of, especially new teachers, but just teachers in general, having those Sunday night scaries and being desperate and going out there and having to pay money out of their pocket for resources that oftentimes are not helpful, and that research has also showed can even be harmful to students. And so we try to set up this model in a way that the teachers themselves don't have to pay for the support, but the mentors do get paid. And so I did want to put that out there to make sure that you're aware of how we're doing things differently, and I think in a way that you will appreciate. Margarita, thank you so much for your work in terms of helping get the word out around mentorship. Alejandro, I see your note about the recording. I'll leave that to the LEC folks to share about when the recording will be available. But that brings us to the end of our deck. I definitely would love to use this available time to take additional questions and provide answers, whether it be from me or from Katie. And again, would welcome everybody to think about how we can link arms together.
Yeah, I think if folks want to either raise their hand or go into the Q&A, of course, we have the capability to have folks speak out loud. And so if they want to ask their question out loud, that works too. Thank you, Dr. Reese and Katie, for the presentation. We have our first raised hand. So Margarita, I'm going to unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I I don't know. What about if those who want to participate and do a little bit more than just mentoring, we go to the neighborhood association meetings and invite them to join right there in the board in the meeting to become a mentor. And we can't have a competition among neighborhoods to find out which is the one that has more mentors. When I did my recruiting for Garfield, actually it was for Garfield, but then it happened to be like for wherever the person was living. I recruited so many volunteers for the mentorship for the public schools. Every time I went to the board meetings of Pendleton's neighborhood. So that is a really great place. And also in the coffee shops, everybody signed. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people signed in. So, but I think it's just having a competition is usually people have some pride and you want to win and you want to be the best neighborhood. That could work.
Gracias, Margarita. Yeah, we definitely appreciate any help in terms of getting the word out and any recruitment you're open to doing. So definitely feel free as well to reach out to us directly around those possibilities. I should share just, in the vein of transparency, I guess, a little bit more about the work that Adrian and Melchon are doing. So we are taking a look at ecosystems and kind of mapping those ecosystems in, like I said, the Kansas City region, the Twin Cities region, the Omaha region, the Greater Baltimore region, and West Texas for starters. And so one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that if there are other organizations that we should be aware of and might want to also link arms with, that we're talking with them, that we're thinking about how their work connects with this work. We don't think we have all the solutions in any way, but we do know that when we work together, we can achieve some great things. And so definitely would welcome any of those good ideas and any of those opportunities to connect.
Yeah, and as an organization, we're we're considering what our contribution, right, and what our level of effort is to all of it, because like I said, the reason we're here today is because that's one of the things we've heard a lot is that some of our newer teachers or teachers that are struggling are wanting mentorship. And so there may be some kind of more official partnership that can happen with Edifying and LEC. It's kind of right now in its beginning stages. And so thank you I know there's more questions in the Q&A. So Dr. Ruiz, I'll let you take it away again.
Yes, thank you for affirming on that, Susana. I'll go to the anonymous attendee question first. I didn't realize I had to scroll down a little bit here, so I'm glad we have some catching up to do. So I'll go with the question about it says, what would you say has been something or some things that mentor candidates look for in a program like ET? So I mentioned a little earlier, again, just the fact that, again, in a lot of cases, there's this term called the invisible tax. And so there's this idea that, hey, Susanna, you seem to be willing to give and help out in lots of different ways. Could you add mentorship to your plate? And by the way, could you do it as a volunteer? And so the fact that, we offer a paid opportunity is one piece that differentiates us. The training, I think, definitely differentiates us. And I think as well, the fact that we are, again, very open to learning together is different. So again, every month we have these virtual huddles where the whole cohort of mentors for a particular partnership gets together with their local lead and gets to share, what are they seeing? What are they experiencing? They're all learning from each other. There's another aspect as well that helps with kind of the career navigation and leadership development of the mentors. And so hopefully you've seen, whether it be on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, the fact that we love our mentors. We want to, again, not only sponsor them by paying them, but we also want to elevate their platform. And so we celebrate them in many different ways to talk about their great background, some of the great feedback that we're hearing from the mentees, and to make sure that, whether they're at the school level or whether they're at the district level or wherever they may be, we want the world to know how great they are. And so that's a big bonus, I think, of working with us, is that, none of us is trying to take the credit for the work that they're doing. And we want to make sure that if there are opportunities that we can expose them to, we want to help with that. Go ahead, Katie.
I was going to add really quickly onto that. One of the things I think, again, and Rudy kind of mentioned it, was our training and how we prepare edifiers. What we offer is it's training modules. So there's like four modules total. And in terms of skills, right, I always like to say, you may be a teacher, you may have been in the classroom for 25 years, whatever role you may have. But mentorship in general, like how to be a mentor, isn't necessarily something just like teaching, where like you're just born to be a great mentor. You may be really great at, obviously people are like, oh, people come to me for advice, I'm unofficially mentoring. But in terms of like frameworks or in terms of skill sets, right, I think that's something we all benefit from. And so one of the things that our training does, and this has been my work, is really look at what are the main skills or skill sets that mentors need. And an example would be obviously like relationship building, but also like bias, like looking at your own bias, looking at what are some of the deep work that you actually need to do before you engage within a mentorship relationship. Because I want to add that, mentors, as much as we want to be helpful, especially as we enter communities or marginalized communities or people that have been historically marginalized, there's always that potential to not be as helpful as we want. And so our training really focuses on what are it's also doing the deep work in yourself. Like, what are some of those things that I'm carrying into this relationship? We also, in addition to that, we also like talk about what it's like to have difficult conversations, right? So within your mentoring work, there may be a time where you have to have a hard conversation with your mentee or vice versa. And what does that look like? And so these are all of the pieces that we do address within our training, which I do think makes us unique. We also, as I mentioned before, we really acknowledge the intersectionality of people. And I say that, and I don't say that lightly, but I mean, like, we all come from, again, different backgrounds, different experiences. We may identify in different social groups, and that can be a wide range of things. And so we just don't look at one thing. And kind of to Rudy's point, it's not just, oh, a Latinx teacher may want to be with a Latinx teacher, right? Yes, that may be true, but there's also other elements or intersectionalities of our identity. And we're really interested in supporting as many as we can. And the other thing is, just because you have a mentor and that may be your one mentor and edifier, doesn't mean you don't have access to the community, right? And that's what also makes us really unique, is Rudy was talking about that career navigation. It's like, yes, you might be working with your mentee, and your mentee may have an interest in a career aspiration or something that you may not know a lot about, but there's someone in our network that does. And so part of that is building those bridges too, even if it's not even your area, but it's building those bridges to help support that teacher, right, that mentee across all different people. And it sounds corny, but it does take a village, right? It's not just about one relationships, it's about, I would say, more of a web. But I could talk forever about that, so I'm going to pause because I know we have more questions.
Katie, I'm going to go first on this question from our friend Mel Sean, and I'm going to welcome you to add to it as well. So Mel Sean was asking how mentorships have created an atmosphere that makes being an edifier not feel like this is a lot more on their plate as a teacher, and how they made room to support another teacher on top of the duties they may already have. And so I think I can answer that question in a few ways. I think at a very basic logistical level for starters, to make sure that it is, a quality experience on both ends. We begin mentor deployment, if you will, with one mentee. And so if you want to get a start with us, we want to make sure it's comfortable for you. We want to get you started with one mentee, see how that feels for both of you, help you out with these different checkpoints, give you feedback as we get feedback, and so on. For folks who have a good first experience and feel like they've got enough bandwidth in their life to take on more than one mentee, we do allow for that to happen. We do have some cases currently where we even have mentors who are providing mentorship for mentees in even different states. And so again, it kind of depends on where people are in their career and in their life. And what we try to do is at this point, one of our improvements, set up our scheduling by semester. And so we know that in many cases, both mentors and mentees are often like yourself, Alshon, in grad school, continuing their education, etc. And so what we try to do is make scheduling easier and help them find a time that will be a good standing time. So maybe it's, every other Tuesday evening or something like that for first semester, but then we'll do a checkpoint for the next semester to say, okay, what should next semester look like, and allow for some adjustments there. And so we try to make sure that we're modeling what we talk about for our teachers, meaning mentees, in the way that we first treat our mentors. And so we obviously want to see them and treat them as full humans as well. But Katie, I know you'll have a lot of great pieces to add to that question.
We all need bigger plates. No, I'm kidding. But no, really, seriously, there's a lot, right? I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot going on in the education system right now. And I also want to acknowledge there's a lot of, whether it be paperwork or duties, etc. But those that are within a classroom or approximate to a classroom, it is all of the things right now. And so one of the things that, Rudy was kind of alluding to was this idea of relationship. And really the investment, right? So being a mentor, I'm going to say it is an investment, and it's an investment not only in your mentee, but also within yourself. And I say that because you will learn, again, like the value add of like the skills, the relationship building, but more of that, like I always, from personal experience, I always feel like when I mentor or I work with the teacher, and just to let you know, I work within the teacher prep world. So a sidebar, as Rudy mentioned, I do work at Teachers College at Columbia University. I adjunct there. And I work with a lot of cohorts, and I work with a lot of new teachers. And so one of the things that I always reflect on is that I feel like I learn more about myself and more about my own practice every semester versus what I learn, they teach me just as much as I teach them. And in some ways I find myself, I would argue, maybe even learning more. So one of the things that I want to say is, yes, it's the scheduling, it's the intentionality, yes, it is that investment, it is carving out the time. But I think one of the things, and we've also started getting feedback from our current edifiers from one of our pilots, not pilots, but one of our sites, I should say. And 100% of edifiers have actually indicated that they would continue mentoring, even with the bumps that go along the way with mentorship. And I want to uplift that because I think at the end of the day, it's being, it's that sense of you want to be, or you want to really help someone that may be in a place that you were even 3 or 4 years ago. And you're not going to do it alone. And that's another thing that I say to mentors is you're going to have this community. Like if something happens, life happens, and you can't meet that one day, you're going to be establishing that relationship. So you can say to your mentee, hey, can we switch to this other day? Or can we do, can we do a touch point versus maybe it's not on Zoom? We do encourage Zoom, of course. We encourage that connection. But again, like life happens. And so part of it is like, how are you going to make it work? That work for both of you, because a good mentoring relationship needs to be beneficial and invested on both sides. Hopefully I've answered that question or given you a little more perspective, but if not, I'm always welcome to get more into that. Yes, there are a lot on teachers' plate. It is real. And I will definitely, I do want to uplift that. Again, it is very hard. And I appreciate you, and maybe I don't see you like physically because I'm on a webinar, but I just want to acknowledge that Dr. Ruiz and it's easy from our, places at times. He was a classroom teacher. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years. We see you, and we know it's hard.
Thank you, Katie. And I appreciate, Katie, you're calling out the fact that, this is a uniquely challenging time. And a lot of the circumstances are harder than ever. I had to have that realization myself a few years ago, just the fact that, while again, I have been doing some of the research and seeing some possibilities here. And even though I started out, 8 years in the classroom in my hometown of Milwaukee, at this point, it's been 15 years since I was teaching in the classroom. And so I realized it was critical for me to find folks who are, have, had taught through the pandemic, are experiencing today's realities and can help guide folks to navigate those realities successfully. So glad you brought that up. I do see a couple more questions coming in. Yes, so I'll answer Margarita's question and maybe clarify as well a little bit. So there is, of course, an important body of work around youth mentorship, and I think one of the key stats is that when youth have a mentor, they're 55% more likely to go on to a college or career than those who don't. This in particular, of course, we're focused around teacher mentorship. And in terms of, again, that cycle of support, what we've found is manageable for, again, adult learners and the realities of the teacher life today, and knowing that there's still staff meetings, there's still, other things in people's lives, is every other week a 30-minute session. And so in terms of how we pay our mentors, one of the cool things about, again, are seeing people for their full value in a sense is that we actually pay our mentors $50 an hour, and what we do is we compensate them for the full hour even though the session is 30 minutes. And so we know it's going to take a little time to prep. We want to make sure we have, again, a little bit of documentation around what were some key themes in that conversation. And so we feel, again, that that's an appropriate level at which to compensate the mentors. And to Katie's point, again, oftentimes that does happen in, after school hours. But also in terms of, again, the matching process, we do know that some folks are early birds and would, find it more convenient to even meet before school hours. So we allow for folks to kind of identify and get matched in that vein as well. Last question I'm seeing here for the moment. When did you decide to become a teacher? Would you say there's progress or potential engaging interest in becoming an educator to high school students? I would love to answer that question, but I'll give you the first crack at it if you like, Katie.
I yield the floor, sir. You may start.
Cool, thanks. So we believe that a lot of emphasis over the years, and even in the last couple of years and currently, has been on recruitment, and too little and almost none on retention. And so we are really, humbled and motivated to help fill that gap through this core work. But we know that less young people are going into education programs and colleges. We know less are completing, less are staying in. And so again, in terms of the notion of collective efficacy and collective impact, we have many, many strategic partnerships, including national and international partnerships. A couple of our key partnerships are with folks who are really focused on grow your own, as the term is used, to talk about bringing more young people, especially more underrepresented young people, including young men, including, of course, people of color, into the profession. And so we've got some great friends with respect to Educators Rising, with respect to Real Men Teach, and many others. And so, we want to make sure that we're helping young people not just hear the challenges, but also hearing how amazing it is to be a teacher, and uplifting how wonderful the profession is. And so, those are the things that drew us in to answer the first part of the question. And what we're trying to do is collaborate with some of those grow your own leaders to say, hey, we want to help elevate the profession as a profession and a pathway of interest for young people earlier. And we want to make sure that when they answer that call, they have the support that they need. Katie, do you mind taking a look at that last question?
Yeah, thank you. So you're right. The idea around a 30-minute session. The reality is, for those obviously, like those in the teaching world, you may only have 30 minutes, right? And so that's part of it, is you may be doing your mentor session during a prepped work or, after work. And I would actually say that a lot can happen in 30 minutes. Part of what we have is a framework and suggestion of how that session could be laid out. So obviously the beginning of a session is just reconnecting, how the progress is going. If a pair has established their goals, what are those progress on their goals? And really, in my opinion, a mentor's job really is like, what do you need from me, right? So it's asking that question of the mentee, like, how can I be supportive? What do you need from me? How can I help you? And again, it is hard to stay within that 30 minutes. But I would say in terms of like resource sharing, again, goal progress, getting to know, like before you even start those like 30-minute mentor sessions, at least 2 of your sessions, which are still 30 minutes, you're not even really going to talk about academics or all that pieces. You're going to just get to know each other, right? That's the foundational piece. You need to get to know the person that's on the other side of the screen first. So again, like there is a agenda-ish, and it is something that we've considered in terms of what it is. We're always looking at how we can make pivots or changes. But I would say like our recommend is 2 30-minute sessions a month. And our data has shown that mentees have made progress within their goals. And I'm also going to say that, again, to Rudy's point at the very beginning, sometimes you may have just like a lesson plan, a best laid agenda. If you're like, we're going to talk about this and go through this today, and then you hop on a call and you're dealing with a teacher that is having a moment, which we've all been there, and then you realize that your agenda is not going to go the way it's supposed to, and that's okay too. Sometimes our job is just to listen. And I'm going to say that again. Sometimes as mentors, our job is just to listen and to be there. And so again, it's a touch point. But I would say like, yes, again, we have those frameworks, we have those tools of what 30 minutes could look like. We also trust your intuition and trust our mentors that they're going to be able to support their mentee and whatever is needed within that moment as well. Do you have anything to add to that, Rudy?
I do have a few points to add. Thank you for a great initial response. And so I flipped back intentionally on the deck to this cycle of support model just to affirm how those 2 30-minute sessions kind of fit in this monthly support cycle. One of the pieces that is an additional piece I didn't elaborate on with respect to the question about what does research say, is the fact that we have actually adapted for the education sector this notion of micro coaching by the school leadership. And so what we know is that very often the principal and school leadership team has a really hard time keeping up with being able to provide meaningful regular touch points to the teachers. And so we see this as a collaborative effort. And so the reason that we end up feeding back to them some of the key themes and some of the follow-up opportunities is so that if the school leader wants to be supportive, they're not stopping by Katie's room and saying, nice bulletin board, because they haven't had a chance to have a meaningful conversation about what is a substantive thing that Katie needs help with. And so our mentorship allows us to say, hey, we had this great conversation, and when you do stop by and have that short chat in the building in between these sessions, here are a couple meaningful things that would add some value and build that relationship between you and Katie in the school building. And so we don't see again all the work kind of falling on us. We want this to be collaborative, and we see those as being kind of alternating touch points between us and the school leadership team. I would also say Katie will affirm that when we have had mentees say, hey, everything's actually pretty manageable in my life, and I wish I could have an extra mentorship session, when they kind of reach back up to me and say, hey, can we give another mentorship session? I'm going to say yes. And so what we want to do is make sure that, again, in terms of the notion of teacher self-efficacy, teachers are feeling more and more successful, and not like, oh, I was supposed to have a weekly chat with my mentor. I can't keep up with that. Now this is something else I'm failing at. I'm a really terrible teacher. And so what we found is that every other week cadence is manageable to keep me encouraged, keep boosting my confidence, and have it be something that we can say, yes, we met, and yes, we're making progress, and yes, this fits in with the other things that the school and the district are having me do as a new teacher.
Well, folks, we have reached our hour together. I'm so appreciative of all the participation in the Q&A and in the chat today for the question part of our session. As Dr. Ruiz and Katie talked about, there's nowhere to go here but up, right? And there's a lot of possibilities in Kansas City to engage as a mentor. And so Edifying will stay in touch, the LEC will stay in touch. And as things move forward, you will get lots more information. Dr. Ruiz, Katie, anything else before we hop off? Thank you both so much. I know that you were with a local school district today, right? At a meeting?
We were. And so like we said, keep that in prayer. We want to make a match, between, your prospective mentors and those folks in the community that could use that help.
Yeah, it's obviously very much needed. So thank you both so much for your time. We have some thank yous in the Q&A, so feel free to, or make sure to take a peek at those. Everyone who's here, you will also get this recording just in case you need to look back at it or you need to send it over to a friend. And got some emails popping into the chat, so please feel free to take note of those. Dr. Ruiz, Katie, we'll talk very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. Bye, everyone.